All right, everybody, welcome back to the Bent Limbs podcast. I'm your host, Matt Thielking. Sorry, you guys, it's been a little while since we have done an episode, but I'm really excited about today's episode. I'm joined by Steve White. Many of you who are serious crossbow hunters probably know who Steve is. Others of you may not know the name Steve White, but you may know Sue or SEW on Crossbow Nations Forum. He is one of the top contributors there, and he's someone I've been in contact with. I've been picking his brain a lot because you can just tell Steve is a wealth of knowledge as far as crossbows go. So, Steve, thank you for joining me tonight. Welcome to the Bent Limbs podcast.
I'm honored to be here.
So I think we'll just kick things off with a little bit of an intro, about yourself, your background, and kind of how you got started crossbow hunting.
Okay, well, I am from Arkansas. I live once again in Arkansas. I'm a 75-year-old retired dentist. After high school, I went to college, got a degree in chemistry and math. For a year, I was a chemist for a major oil company and supplemented my income by car mechanicing. I was drafted and went through Army Basic at Fort Benning, Georgia, but got an inter-service transfer to the Air Force, became an officer, went to flight school, and was assigned to F-111s. Eventually on to fighter weapons school a few years later, and better known as Top Gun School. This is where my lifelong love of ballistics and longer range shooting began in earnest. Before being drafted, I had just started to enter dental school. Though I was in love with flying and being in bombing contests and representing the bases where I was stationed, I couldn't control my competitiveness. I'm singularly focused, which was really a problem. It's been a problem all my life, so I have to stay away from competitive things. And it was having an adverse effect on my marriage. I made the fateful decision to get out after 10 years and go back to dental school. When I initially got out of the Air Force, there were essentially no openings for new airline pilots, and I love to fly. However, I went on to dental school, and right after dental school graduation, there were many openings. That's just how things work. I got my airline pilot's license just in case I decided on a career change. However, I retired from dentistry after 35 years. I still keep my flight instructor's license current, as well as maintaining my dental license. I normally fly 2 to 3 times a week to unwind. Actually, I'm keeping tabs on my deer at least 11 miles away. It's agricultural land, has soybeans on it, and about half woods, half agricultural land. And I just have to keep an eye on what's where and when.
Okay.
Concerning archery, I instruct both the elementary and the high school NASP programs in the local school. I love traditional shooting, instinctive shooting. My childhood obsession, and this was when there were only traditional bows, was bow hunting. Rabbits, squirrels, foxes, bobcats, and deer. I started hunting at age 10. I still shoot both the NASB Genesis bow and my own Palmer Whitetail Classic recurve. I absolutely love instinctive shooting and plan to continue on until I get old, which is a long time from now. I've been married for 54 years to the love of my life. I have 3 grown children. I try to live my life according to Jesus' teachings, which I summarize as do unto others like you'd want them to do unto you. So that's me.
So that that is a awesome intro and awesome background. And is that kind of how you got into the crossbow hunting, and really kind of what I want to dive into. And if people don't know, is Steve is extremely good at shooting a crossbow. He's extremely good at shooting long range, and hopefully you guys want to hear what he has to say as much as I do, because I want to pick Steve's brain as far as how I get better at shooting longer distances, or just getting every ounce, every bit of accuracy and performance out of my crossbow that I can. And I mean, I guess, Steve, I'm kind of, maybe making an assumption here, but I would guess that your background in the military, your background in aviation, ballistics, all that stuff is kind of what uh, drove you into some of this deep diving and extreme accuracy, extreme long range shooting, if you will, with a crossbow. Is that a correct assumption?
Yes, moderation isn't one of my faults. So yes, but I got my first 22. I live in a very rural area. I
Okay.
got my first 22 when I was 8. I got my first shotgun, double barrel Damascus twist, 12 gauge Ithaca, when I was 10. And and there was a city dump about 2 miles from my house, and I would walk there when I was 10 or 11 with my 22 with a carton, 500 long rifle bullets. And I would sit across from that dump at about 75 to 100 yards, and I would shoot rats. If I could get a wounded rat, I had it made, because the others would try to come and eat it. And so if you could have one out there that wasn't mobile, but he was hollering, the others would come. Now, would I do that today? No, but I was, 11, 12, 13 years old, and I had a little less sensitivity. But I would shoot all 500 bullets during that day. I just loved shooting. But for some reason, when it came to hunting animals, it was strictly bow. That's what I used. I mean,
Okay.
from like age 13, 14 on, it didn't matter. I mean, squirrel, rabbit, whatever, it was bow. And it wasn't until the late 1980s that I love to shoot muzzleloaders. I worked on the Savage 10 ML2 project with Toby Bridges. I was a serious bench rush shooter and reloader. Toby was serious muzzleloading shooter. I was serious muzzleloading shooter. We lived 100 miles apart. We knew each other, and but I was a reloader, and I ended up using Quick Load Quick Target, which really helped with the safe loads for the Savage 10 ML2 or 10 ML, and then later the 10 ML2. So a large part of the early loads were loads that I had worked up with that. But 50 caliber is just such overkill, in my opinion, huge bullets, 250, 300 grain bullets of 45 caliber, actually, and shot in sabos. I ended up getting very serious with 3 different 40 caliber smokeless powder muzzleloaders that shoot out to 600, 700 yards.
Wow.
One of them out to about 400, and my ultralight out to about 300. So I've always been into ballistics, and crossbows have ballistics too. And I think that from the time I got into crossbows in 1983 until now, we've just had so many advances, and I've learned so much about trying to optimize arrows. But anyway, that's that.
So with the crossbows, we talked previously, um, and you have successfully harvested a lot of deer, and you have done it at some ranges that many people probably wouldn't shoot. and your track record, as far as if I remember correctly, as far as the number of animals you've harvested with a crossbow versus the numbers of animals that you haven't recovered is phenomenal. Um, can you kind of detail, if you know how many animals you've been able to take, and what ranges it is that you typically try to harvest those at?
With bow and crossbow, I don't have them separated. Probably 140. With the crossbow, I've lost 3 deer. Every deer, one deer was at 60 yards, and I hit it exactly where I wanted. I watched that arrow hit. It was with a 3-inch FOC. It was out of a strike zone 380. It did not go all the way through, and I did not get a blood trail. I hunted at least 6 hours for that deer. I'm at a loss. I actually don't remember the details of the other two. But probably, I think 120, 130 is probably how many I have actually gotten, and I've lost the 3.
There are not many people that can say that. I can't. My harvest number is less. My non-recovered animal number is certainly more. And kind of leading up to this, I know you have definitely shot deer at some awesome ranges. And what I was kind of teeing that up because, you know, everybody's got opinions on this. I have opinions, you have opinions, everybody's got them. But I think what is unique about you when it comes down to, if you want to say like the elephant in the room, when it comes down to what is a ethical shot distance, um, you have a different perspective. But not only that, you have extreme success at the ranges that you've shot. You have had better success than I have, or that many people have. And I kind of wanted to, talk to you about that, because everybody, you know, likes to beat up on other people, or saying what is too close, what is too far. You shouldn't do that. You should do this. Um, I kind of just wanted to have you maybe like detail your experiences, talk about that success that you've had long range hunting, and kind of the factors that go into how you, Steve White, make kind of your decisions on whether or not you're gonna squeeze the trigger on your crossbow or let a deer walk.
One thing I've done is I have really studied deer. I mean, I have read a lot. I live on 90 acres of my land and 20 something acres adjoining that I hunt. And I have a deer stand within 80 yards of where I'm sitting at my kitchen table. I have probably 15 deer stands within 200 yards of this kitchen table. And I hunt out here on my own land probably 50 to 60 times a year. So I'm out there quite a bit. I kill an average of 1 deer off my land a year. I watch a lot of deer. I watch them. I have thrown sticks at them. I have arrows that I have shot near a deer to see what it does.
Okay.
I have some cull arrows that I shot right into a tree next to the deer. I want to see what they do, and so I had prepared a little statement here. I'll read it, and then when I get through reading what I've written, we'll get back to the conversation like we're doing. What I'd written just in my thoughts, because I knew this question was going to come up. Personal ethics say a lot about a person. As a pilot, whether with passengers on board or with a military target to take out, ethics come into play. And just as much when hunting, iffy shots are not ethical. If there's any significant doubt whether a clean kill can be made, the shot should not be taken. To me, the most risky shot would be at an alert or nervous deer at 30 to 40 yards. I generally pass these up because the deer has plenty of time to react to the shot, the sound of the string, and or the sight or sound of the arrow when shooting at this range, which is the most likely chance of a poor or missed hit due to the animal's reaction. If if the animal is highly alert, and especially if the deer is looking towards the hunter. If there's a deer at 30 or 40 yards, it's looking the other way, and it doesn't seem like it's on high alert. Yeah, of course I'd shoot it if I wanted to shoot it. Only with my muzzleloaders will I shoot at a deer with its head even faintly turned in my direction. I think the worst places are the greatest chance for a quote jump string or deer ducking the arrow, whatever it does, whatever you want to call it, is from 25 yards down. And correction, it is the places where I mentioned there, the 30 to 40 yard range. From 25 yards down, 45 yards and beyond, they're totally different. I plan all my crossbow shots at 60 yards. So I put my corn piles right at 60 yards if I can. We can bait here. Same thing on placing my stands at my food plots, where I'll be somewhere 50 to 60 yards. At 60 yards, if there's any reaction to the shot, and I've watched this many, many times, it will be the deer freezing in place, looking for the source of the sound. Rarely, if ever, is there a reaction to a crossbow shot sound at 45, 50 yards or greater. Only shoot when the deer is looking away if possible, or when its head is down or going down, like I said before. With a crossbow, I almost invariably hunt scrapes, trails, food plots, and corn piles. With my vertical recurves, I hunt trails or scrapes at 10 to 20 yards maximum. I think wind is really a big, big deal of not being scented. And 15 feet, which is about my highest deer stands, I don't think that gets you out of there. I like 20 and above. I don't happen to have any. But playing the wind is so important. And with thermals, thermals can really help a lot during the hot day. I mean, air's coming up, you're not going to get scented generally. But air moving up a hill during the day can eat your lunch. If there is a wind blowing that way also. And then, of course, late in the day, the air goes down the hill, everything else equal. So early and midday goes up, late it goes down. I try to always take that into account. I hunt off the ground quite a bit too, just because I enjoy it. So I never hunt with the wrong wind. Anyway, back to our discussion.
Yeah, there's a few things in there that I think a lot of people don't necessarily consider when they start talking about ethical shot distances. And there's a lot that you consider, what that animal is doing. I think that is extremely important with any archery equipment. And you've studied it. You're talking about, you do test shooting at, not hitting a deer, but discharging your crossbow, shooting into a tree, shooting into the ground. I mean, that's fantastic. That's awesome. Like that gives me some ideas of like, wow, I could probably do some similar things on some of these early season hunts where I'm hoping to get lucky, but I'm really just going to kind of a burner stand and just wanting to watch deer type of thing. I think that's a really cool idea. One thing like for me personally, when we talked kind of about this stuff, it was a while ago, and my opinion was always I kind of always hunted with a crossbow like I would a compound bow. The same ranges, kind of the same setups, and honestly, there's a lot, like for me personally, a lot of it's not that I can't do it or the bow can't do it. It's what I can do in certain situations, resting offhand, resting in awkward shot angles, um, you know, elevated in a tree in the brush. That now that, I've talked to you and I've kind of played with some stuff, my even perception has changed about like shot distance. I still think a lot of my setups that are kind of compound bow slash crossbow, they're still in that, I probably wouldn't feel comfortable shooting more than 40 yards, resting off my knee, resting off hand. But I think if I'm in a pop-up blind and I can take like I'm in love with the bog death grip, I've been using that a lot. Something that is a shooting aid, hunting over a big food plot, hunting over a cut cornfield type of thing where you've got normally calm deer feeding at longer distances. I certainly think, me personally, I could extend my shot range out to that, 50, maybe even 60 yards. Another thing I think too, is you have to make sure your broadheads will fly that far. A lot of us can sling field points, all day at extended ranges, but if our broadheads don't, or if we don't know how our broadhead is going to fly, be it mechanical, be it fixed blade, that is an element also I think people have to consider. So it's just super interesting to me, Steve, that you've kind of taken some of those things, you've studied it, you've used those details, and I think you're right in a sense, at least even from what I can hear in some of my videos that I've done of like listening to, if I have my phone at my target and I shoot and I hear the sound and I hear the arrow coming and I hear impact at 30 yards versus some of those longer ones. I think there's a lot of truth to exactly what you're saying. And I guess where I was going with all that, Steve, is it really is a personal decision as far as the types of shots that you're going to take at animals, just based on conditions, based on the terrain, based on your skill level, what you're comfortable with, based on your equipment. All those things factor in. And I just want everybody to just, be perfectly clear with, this is not a who's right, who's wrong. This is a learning experience for everyone.
I'd like to give some thoughts on what you asked about the ethical shots, if I could, because I know that's a big
Absolutely.
deal. Okay.
Absolutely.
A big part of ethical hunting is being able to hit what you want to hit yourself, the accuracy. And so with my crossbow, I always use a rangefinder or occasionally marked ranges. I've hunted this land here at my house for many decades. And I have a lot of signs of ranges from my blinds. And even with great rest, accurate ranges, and never plan on hunting at a range where your practical group size doubled is over 4 to 5 inches.
Okay.
Doubled, because when you're hunting, it's not going to be quite the same as target shooting. For poor rest or offhand, maybe 3 times your consistent group size at that range. So if you're hunting arrow / scope setup is 2 inches for a 3-shot group at 50 yards, then 50 yards is about your maximum hunting range. So if your groups are 2 inches, I think 50 yards is about it. Maybe 60. And then only if the deer can be expected not to move for the next 1/3 to 1/2 second. For what it's worth, for the 65 years I've deer hunted, movement has never been a problem. except in the early years with those 30 to 40-yard shots with much slower bows. The SWAT bows, the SWAT crossbows with optimized arrows are truly capable of sub 2-inch 6-shot groups at 100 yards with an expandable broadhead. That is virtually unheard of. By today's standards, they are not fast. They're in the upper 300s. But neither was Carlos Hathcock's, another Arkansan, 308 Remington 700 when he shot the 4-star general at over 800 yards. He chose to use a Remington 308 over his previously used, much faster, flatter shooting 300 Win Mag. Accuracy plus good ranging outweighs flatter trajectories every time. And that's something people need to really understand. We're in a speed game right now. Speed sells. Speed is a big deal. Speed without accuracy. And not saying that fast bows aren't accurate whatsoever, but I'm very comfortable in the upper 300s. With commonly used modern crossbows, energy remaining isn't even a valid concern. Even at 100 yards, it's generally at least 3 times what's needed. So at a more common hunting ranges, energy remaining is absolutely a non-factor. A little story that got me into the longer range hunting. In 1991, I was just burned out as a dentist. I was working 50, 60 hours a day. I mean, a week. Dentistry is hard. It's hard on shoulders, hard on arms, hard on nerves. And I was just burned out. I was ready to go fly airlines. And I had friends in airlines and 2 places. I could have flown for FedEx. I could have flown for Delta. All I happen to need is a airline pilot's license. So I thought that it was going to take me a few months to get it. Actually, I got it very quickly, but I thought I wasn't going to get to hunt. So I viewed that I had 1 day to hunt. And I had a high country sniper with ballistic Mirage cams, 57 pounds, 27-inch overdraw, shooting 2013s with 75 grain wasp, 265 feet per second. That's fast back then. I had a Spectrum 500 analog rangefinder, and I was hunting, and we had a 3 deer limit, and a doe came to a scrape that was exactly 55 yards by my rangefinder, my analog rangefinder. I put that on her and lined the little circles up and got it all nice and clear. And she put her nose down to the scrape. I drew, I shot. I had pins to 80 yards. I've always practiced long range. I had pins from 20 to 80 yards. So I put right between the 50 and 60 yard range. I shot, ideal hit. Her head went up. She looked around and trotted off. There was another doe standing beside her. It stayed there. I shot it too. A few minutes later, a small 6-point came to the scrape, and again the same. Put his head down. I shot. No reaction to the shot. Even after the fatal hits, they just trotted off. And there were 75 grain wasp. Only 2 hours into the season, and I was tagged out. But I learned something that day. The deer had no immediate reaction to those shots. So, once again, kind of a summary, a couple of thoughts that I've had. Conditions dictate how ethical the shot can be. State of the deer, wind, lighting, our own ability, rest available, accuracy of the ranging that we have. Each item that is not perfect starts subtracting from the maximum range. The end result is the maximum ethical range for that situation. Brian Miller, a tournament shooter, a contributor on the Crossbow board, Crossbow Nation, shoots many thousands of shots a year. His scopes are top level Vortex scopes, thousands of dollars in each setup, hundreds of hours a year practicing, decades of successful rifle in pistol shooting and winning titles. He has time-proven extreme shooting skills. He's easily in the top 99.9 percentile of crossbow shooters. Should he be judged by those who may not even shoot 10 hours a year? If he is comfortable shooting at twice the range that they've accepted from others on forums as ethical? Of course not. The same with Howard Hill, Ben Pearson, Fred Bear, Mike Palmer, Dick Idle, and others. Are they unethical, hunting at farther ranges compared to average traditional shooters? And of course not. So determine a criteria for your own self, like the one I gave, such as 2-inch groups, and let that set your max range with perfect ranging, taking into account deer movement and all the other stuff mentioned. As time goes on with increasing skill, the maximum ethical range creeps up slowly but surely. One of the greatest frustrations I have, and it is a frustration, is for people to dictate about something they have never done. If all their bow hunting is 45 yards and less, I think then they're frequently shooting at the very ranges where ducking the string and actually ducking the arrow is most likely to occur. Then extrapolating that reaction time out to 50, 60, and 70 yards looks great on paper, but it's very inaccurate.
I was going to say too.
I want to be on my bandwagon. Bandstand.
Well, it sounds like I've got, I know you shoot the SWAT line of crossbows. We've talked a lot about those. I do as well. It sounds like I've got some work to do because my 3-shot group at 100 yards is over 3 inches. So I've definitely got some some more range time, trigger time, practice time, arrow building time, all those things. Because 2 inches, 6 arrows at 100 yards, that's amazing. I mean, that really is amazing. And I like that. That's I had never heard anyone relate a, kind of quantifying a group size to help pick your ranges. Because it's easy for me to put like my bag target at 100 yards and have it on the it looks like a deer and you got the nice big red lungs. And I mean, my wife is even and friends, they can shoot, they can hit that at 60, 70, 80 yards, no problem. Quantifying a group size, I think that's great. And that would put me personally probably in the bucket of like 60 yards is what I'm doing now at a sub 2-inch group. That's 3 arrows. It would be about 60. And yeah, moving on kind of to, diving a little deeper to maybe like what exactly it is you kind of do look at the factors. And maybe, I kind of had, we had talked earlier, I kind of had this broken up as far as if you were going to talk to a beginner, an intermediate person, which I would kind of consider myself, and then taking things to like an expert level. But let's start at the beginner level. You've got someone brand new to crossbow hunting. They just got their first bow. It could be a top of the line. I mean, lots of people are buying top of the line bows as first ones these days, but more often than not, it's probably, something in the more economy class of crossbows, if you want to call it that. What would you kind of tell that person as far as improving accuracy, improving their shooting ability, and being able to shoot at or extending their range if they wanted to for certain situations while they're in the field? What would you kind of tell that beginner?
I think probably the best thing, let's say the beginner is an adolescent.
Okay.
I have an adolescent. I mean, I'm teaching an adolescent. He's 13 years old. He has an entry-level killer instinct crossbow that I am very impressed with the toughness of that thing. And that's a very effective, easily 40, 50-yard crossbow, for like a $300-something bow. Very impressed. I'd say get a good, respected, successful tutor, Or what I did from age 7 or 8, because my dad didn't hunt, nor did any of my friends bow hunt. I just started reading all I could on bows and arrows, watching Robin Hood on television. And that was over 65 years ago. I never stopped. However, I go back to the original statement. Get a good tutor if possible, then start thinking, reasoning things out yourself. Most importantly, learn and understand there are a lot of differences between vertical and horizontal bows, and people need to really know that. Arrows, broadhead flight, FOC requirements, the deadly triangle. All those things are important to know and know the differences. Learn to take proper care of the string and cables. Always check the limbs for cracks, arrows for cracks or splintering, and carefully checking the nocks, especially containment nocks. Read the manual over and over. Look at the pictures of hand, finger, and thumb injuries from getting part of the hand up into the string area when shooting. Learn what the deadly triangle is and fully respect it. Consider using a good pro shop for the purchases because you're going to need that pro shop guy. And so I strongly suggest that. Optimize the crossbow and you're shooting off the best rest you can. You're not trying to say how well you can shoot. Get that crossbow the best it can be. And arrows need to be optimized. Make them quiet. Thick vanes, or at least ones that don't whistle. And the same with broadheads. Many vented broadheads are very noisy. Incidentally, you mentioned this earlier. But whenever I'm testing arrows for quietness, and I want very quiet arrows and broadheads, I stand behind a tree and have somebody shoot at a target that's at least 30 yards beyond where I'm standing, because I don't want to hear the thunk just as I'm trying to hear the noise. But I face the tree, face the shooter, but the tree is totally between the shooter and me, and I'm listening for that arrow to come by. Some veins that are very popular and broadheads that are very popular just make a tremendous amount of noise. Optimize the bow first, and then you, with your ability to use it in field conditions, and eventually end up practicing out of blinds, just whatever your knee, bipod, in the woods at deer, or whatever targets, make it realistic. That's what I would tell the newbie.
How do you feel, Steve? One thing this is kind of a personal opinion, and maybe this is just kind of the shops that I've been to, with exception of some of the smaller shops. The one thing I think is just kind of a lacking in the crossbow industry is that good mentor. And I think part of that is, compounds or, traditional archery or any of that kind of stuff. Like it typically requires someone to go get that kind of thing set up. And there's most archery shops, big and small, are very good about that and very good about kind of teaching you the do's, the don'ts, proper techniques, all that kind of stuff. Crossbows, you can order them on Amazon and you can get it basically a ready to hunt pack. And I guess even at some of the bigger sporting goods stores, I hear a lot of people selling mainly just speed or the high end stuff, kind of just your normal talking points. I have found some smaller shops, but do you feel like those mentors, the knowledge within some of the shops is getting better? Do you feel like it's lacking a little bit? Because I certainly feel like, at least with the ones I interact with, it's definitely lacking in comparison to that of the compound bow shooter.
Well, I have a really limited exposure here.
Okay.
There is, at a place near me, Poplar Bluff, Missouri, is a Twisted Arrow. And the two brothers who own it, who are both policemen, homicide detectives, as a matter of fact, are incredibly knowledgeable they know more about bows than I will ever know, and that includes crossbows. And so that is absolutely incredible. Um, so I've been very spoiled by that and their integrity, etc. There's a place, and I know of two or three others. They're not box stores; they're sporting goods stores, and the people do seem very knowledgeable. So, at least in this section of Arkansas and Missouri, I live 2 miles from Missouri. The people around here are very good. I stopped into a major Bass Pro Shop a few years ago looking at a crossbow, and I was just absolutely in shock at the stuff I was being told by the person there. And so, and that may be more typical of what a lot of people run into.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I don't know. I'd try to pick a shop with a good reputation, and and around here, crossbows are really in usage. We have no centerfire rifle season here. So it's either shotgun muzzleloader or 5.5 months of crossbow season, bow and crossbow. And so we probably have a disproportionate number of crossbow hunters here.
Okay.
So I really don't know enough to answer that question.
That's fair. I've had similar experiences at some of the bigger stores, here locally in the Southwest Michigan area. We've got a couple I'll give shout outs to: Ted Brooks Archery, DNR Sports, Cruisinga Archery. Those are smaller shops that have been around a long time. Those are the ones, if a person in my area were going to go to, I would recommend. But I guess, talking about, I think mentorship is a big thing, because their crossbows are, it's awesome that you can get quality crossbows delivered to your door. You can buy many different brands at many different locations. Even if you don't buy one at a store, I think finding a mentor, finding a shop that knows what they're talking about, and can just help you go through like a crossbow 101 course, I think that is huge for anyone getting started shooting.
Great.
Let's take it to kind of the intermediate level, Steve. So you're talking to basically like a me. I would consider myself intermediate. My hunting buddies, we've hunted with all kinds of stuff. We've hunted with crossbows, we've hunted with compounds, we've hunted with rifles, shotguns, muzzle loaders, all that stuff. So we're not green, but we are the ones seeking this, squeezing out more accuracy, being a better shot, both from the equipment side of things as well as the skill level side of things. What would you tell someone like me how to improve my accuracy, my shot distances, and I guess overall just being a better hunter?
The easiest way to get more accurate is to buy a SWAT crossbow, but that's not the question. Okay. What I do is, if person's at an intermediate level, and I don't consider you at an intermediate level, once again, learn all you can about the game's behavior. Learn to read body behavior and everything else you can about the game sought. The Art of War was written by a Chinese general 600 years before Jesus was born. So 2,600 years ago, it's required in every military academy to be read. It still is a state of the art of warfare textbook. And what it says is, know your enemy. And that's how come the head of the Japanese Navy in World War II had a master's in international relations from Harvard. He lived in the United States quite a while. He knew Americans. He knew Americans well enough to warn the emperor, don't get these people mad at you, and don't attack them, and don't do Pearl Harbor. But he did. And eventually, of course, what he predicted would happen happened. But what did he do? He knew his enemy, and we need to know our game. But we also need to, this intermediate person needs to really learn to optimize the crossbow, the optics for the type of hunting the person does. Get proper optics for that. I have for long used a dial range like an optimizer or a jack plate. Get a good rangefinder. I finally got a really good rangefinder. I got a Vortex 4000 after using the same rangefinder for 15 years. Just got it a few months ago. Get really good arrows. I started getting arrows from sharks from Jerry Radcliffe in Florida at Tap Nation. That's one reason I get the groups I get. Broadheads, figure out what you need and really analyze them. I've ended up with True Glow expandables, though I understand mega meats are extremely good. And I think that the new broadheads that 150 grain expandable that KI is coming out with will certainly be one I'll be using. And then practice and practice and practice. And it ranges far beyond any anticipated shot. If you're shooting at 100 yards, 80 yards, and you're not really interested in hunting beyond 60 yards, then that 60 yards is going to seem really easy and close when the time comes. That's my thought. Now, if a person wants to practice incessantly, like I have shot thousands of shots a year, crossbows can wear out. They're a mechanical thing. Well, into the more, I have a comment here for advanced shooting, what I do, or I guess it's advanced as I'm going to get. I have some thoughts on arrows that I'll share with you.
I think I agree with everything you said for intermediate, and that's a lot of the stuff, I'm working on. I can definitely relate to higher quality arrows. I can definitely relate to the optics, although I have never used, something like a HHA optimizer, a dial one. I've used more of the like the speed ring style scopes, the reticles that you can calibrate, and those have worked well for me, especially in the distances that I've been comfortable at. Yeah, broadheads, making sure, not to get down that wormhole of what broadhead is the best. But, just making sure you understand, I think that's a really good point. Understanding, what it is. I always say like what you're comfortable with, like almost everything has trade-offs, be it, especially broadheads. So just figure out kind of what it is that you are seeking, knowing its limitations, knowing its advantages, and making sure you're catering your shots, your hunting style, your setups to that. And I can certainly say, I've gotten really into just playing around with arrows and doing the tuning, and it amazes me, and it kind of disappoints me a little bit that I never did that kind of stuff, 5 years ago for a compound, for a crossbow, for anything. But it amazes me how much more accurate your crossbow is, especially with broadheads. And I've gone more fixed blade the last couple years, and I mean they shoot so much better than if you just kind of take them out of the box, pick something and throw it on there. I mean it's awesome. And I know Jerry at South Shore Archery, right, with the spinal taps. I mean, he's kind of at least from everything I've read, I've never shot him, but he seems to be the bar as far as arrow building accuracy goes for a crossbow. And I certainly wouldn't mind getting some. I kind of like to play around myself though, so it's like learning the building process, or the tuning process. It has paid dividends not only for myself but for my friends. So I couldn't agree more with you there. One, I guess, just question, how do you feel, Steve, about when we talk about optics? There is a lot out there. You talked about your preference with the more like the dial, HHA optimizer kind of style with a quality scope on there. How do you feel about kind of the speed ring style scopes? Because I know they're popular, they're easy to use. It gives you a lot of options as far as easy to figure out range, like knowing exactly where your reticle dots are for different ranges. I mean, what's kind of your take on those?
Um, I've generally been against them,
Okay.
and here's why. I don't. I don't know what the person or the people were doing when they came up with those spacings on the range marks once they got to 50 yards and beyond. I actually wondered if they were just really tired or if they had been drinking a lot or what, because they just they just rarely ever matched up. The only one that I ever saw that was just incredibly accurate was the XB75 by Zeiss. That was a Terra scope, reasonably decent lens, nice size scope, about the most beautiful reticle I've ever seen in crossbow. It'd go to 75 yards. It was perfect. Tom Butler, Moon on the Boards, is the one who designed that reticle and designed it perfectly. The only problem that Zeiss did, and I told them this when I tested the scope well before they started selling it, was not many people are going to be interested in a scope that the reticle disappears with 15 minutes of shooting light left. It was an incredible scope. But every other scope I have tested that goes on out very far, and that doesn't mean that every scope that there is, but it's everyone I tested. I don't know what the ballistic coefficient of the arrow, if they actually used something like that, but it was terrible. The one that came up is one that I'll mention a little bit later here, and that's the Max View 36 that KI has come out with, that Brian Miller designed, did all the spacing, and it goes out to 150 yards. It is optimized for the SWAT X1 and the factory arrows. And I have shot it on the factory arrows and shot with that scope. I've only shot it to 130 yards. I have not shot it to 150. I have seen some groups that Brian has done at 150 that I would be just real happy with at 100. But and that's with factory arrows. So what scope would I use? Multi-lined with that scope, because it has absolutely beautiful. Its optics are really good in low light, shockingly good in low light, and the reticle will turn down. It'll turn down low enough that you'll have to turn it back up, even in virtually pitch black, like a very fine Zeiss rifle scope. It's the first scope I've run into like that. The Evo X is a very close second, but it didn't have the range marks like this one. So this one is one that truly does have it all. And for 229, I am going to hunt. It's going to be the first year I've ever hunted with a multi-line crossbow scope.
Really?
Never yet have I run into one until this one. And Brian is going to also. And Brian has been using a Razor Vortex scope until now. I have been using Zeiss Duralights. Okay. We're going to hunt with the Killer Instinct scope.
Yeah, I've got that scope now too. I have shot it out to 60, which I have experience with the Lumix speed ring scope, and now this one. And the Lumix I liked the reticle. I just liked it. Was very easy to kind of get on target with those, if you want to call it more traditional ranges. But I did find, after about 60, 70 yards, you kind of had to just play around with it. The Max View, I have not shot it past 60. I kind of did my initial sight in um, just a little bit ago, and I did a video, and it was real easy to get on at 60, and I have not tried it any farther than that, but I do like that reticle. It is definitely an upgrade. That's not to knock anything on the Lumix, but the optics are definitely better. The clarity's better. The reticle, surprisingly to me too, was not like cluttered. I was a little worried when I first saw that and it had dots out to 150 yards. But it is a really nice scope. So you know if you, Brian's happy at 150 and you would take that at 100, that's probably like my 50, 60 yard group right there. So let's all right, give me the advanced level, Steve. Advanced level accuracy, advanced level, you know, whether it's with your arrows, with your bow, what does someone need to take into consideration to really take it to the maximum level of accuracy with a crossbow?
Okay, here's what I do. I get the most accurate crossbow possible, or that would fit you. And of course, that doesn't mean just a SWAT, but I mean, to me, I really don't think anything has the accuracy of the SWAT. And I'll get to that uh, later on here. But get whatever crossbow you want that you think is most accurate, and then get the most accurate hunting arrows you can get. The arrows, what's being shot, that is the place to not compromise. And either making your own custom arrows, um, or getting them. I mean, I do spine index. I try to spine match, but I don't have enough shafts to really spine match well. I think WWB on the board has enough that he spine matches, and his reports are extremely good also. Jerry is still there, and Jerry makes class act stuff. I used to want to have a lot of Ceros practical, thinking that the greatest speed would give the flattest trajectory and the best overall performance, but I think I was very wrong. Now, even though I'm concentrating on very long range accuracy, I want fairly high FOC. I mean, really high, well over 20, and very low profile, low offset vanes, low drag, high FOC. You just won't get to high FOC. Being a traditional bow shooter, also, I'm very familiar with tuning an arrow to traditional bow as well as vertical compound bows. Railed crossbows are totally different. The stiffest spine practical, fairly high FOC, and least amount of vane surface area gets you what you want. Contrary to popular thought, arrows do not nosedive. Galileo addressed that hundreds of years ago, probably while he was eating pizza. Arrows degrade. Sad but true. I make 12 to 18 arrows, then I use 6 for sighting in and practice. But of course, I shoot all 12 to 18 first and cull any needed. You won't be culling any of Jerry's arrows. And then set back just 6 for hunting. Crossbow arrows just do better with all the FOC you can get. And they will never nosedive. My ideal is a 22-inch zombie shaft with 130 grain inserts and appropriate knock. 1 degree offset heat vanes, though a number of similar vanes should be just as good or maybe even better. And I use True Gold 100 grain titaniums. I hear nothing but nonstop good about Megameat expendables. But this year, since I'm trying to go strictly KI to show what their stuff will do, I'm going to use the 150 grain KI expandable broadheads. They should be available pretty soon. One exception is my bear hunt this September will be with that same arrow I just mentioned out of my KI X1, but I'll be shooting a 375 grain edge tack single bevel broadhead.
Nice.
I will have a lot of FOC. At 60 yards, I'm keeping half-inch groups with that thing. I didn't figure I could keep 5-inch groups at 30 when I started testing it, but it's eye-wateringly accurate. My bear blind is 54 yards this year from my bear barrel. I know that sounds strange. I've been run out of my bear blind once by a female bear with 3 cubs, and I don't mind having a little bit of time to run with my bear spray in hand. Anyway, that's what I have on the arrows.
You I guess a couple of things there. One, I've heard a lot of good things about the heat vanes. And the arrows I built up the other day, I didn't use those. I used the Fusion Q2i, but basically the ones that KI uses on the Hyperbolts on a different shaft. But I have heard nothing but good things on those heat vanes. If people are wanting to build up some of their own arrows, that is one that I just continue to hear good things about. When you when you look at FOC, you're saying you're shooting a 22-inch arrow. Have you tried anything? I mean, 20 or even, a little bit shorter to gain. Yeah.
How about 19 and 20 and 21
Okay.
and 22? But here's the thing. I have a SWAT, I have an XP, and they both shoot 22-inch arrows. I have 2 X1s.
Okay.
I like to shoot, and I have a Bulldog 400. I shoot the same arrows out of all 4 bows.
That makes sense.
The very same. So if I didn't have that SWAT and the X1, I'd probably have 20-inch arrows.
Okay. Have you ever found you kind of the weights that you're outside of the big single bevel, your kind of total up front insert and broadhead weight is kind of right in the same range as what I've been shooting for a while, that I usually shoot a 110 insert and a 150 head. Have you found there's a like a, I don't know if you want to call it like a threshold to FOC with a crossbow? Some of the paper tuning that I've done when I've tried to go a little heavier, outside of that, like 250, 260 ish up front, I usually start to see tears get worse. Have you seen that, or is it really, if that shaft is tuned, if it's matched well with the fletchings in the back, that it doesn't really matter?
I haven't found it to matter
Okay.
out of the SWATs, but out of the Excalibur, it's a different ballgame. And the reason is this: when an arrow goes down a SWAT barrel, especially if it goes down it with an arc knock, it has no nose lifting whatsoever. When an arrow comes off of a traditionally railed crossbow, it can't bend down. The only place it can go is to bend up.
Okay.
And if you watch slow speed videos of arrow flight, look at which way it goes first. Goes up and down and up and down, follows Hooke's law, eventually comes to steady state, eventually out there after dissipating a bunch of energy. And any spine differences in arrows is going to cause that to be somewhat different. It's going to open up grooves. Whereas the SWAT, with almost no archer's paradox, it just comes out straight, doesn't go through that. And I have not found any difference in a paper tear, regardless of what the FOC is in a SWAT, but I really do with traditionally railed crossbow.
Okay. That makes sense. And when One thing I wanted to, ask you too, especially maybe more so on the fixed blades, um, is at least my experience with a well-tuned arrow. I usually see at like 50-ish yards and some of the fixed blades I've shot is like the Magnus Stinger. Um, I'm playing around with the Tough Head Evolution 3 blade right now. That is a pretty sweet broadhead. I've got some Tooth of the Arrow broadheads, but usually what I've found, or at least what I look for, is no deviation left to right. So up and down, I am good. It's not impacting or penetrating into my target at any funky angles. But I have found like some broadheads maybe want to, especially like a 2 blade, maybe tend to plane where I might get like a little bit of higher point of impact versus my field point, and others seem to maybe fly a little heavy, where I might have a little lower. And when I say a little bit, I'm talking like 1 to 2 inches. Do you see that as from your SWAT, from your rail bow, with a good setup that your fixed blades are maybe a little bit different than your field points, or are they pretty spot on?
When I first started shooting crossbows, well, actually the more modern crossbows, I found I could not get the Bear Super Razor heads to shoot very well unless the 145 grain ones, unless I shot the main blade at 12 and 6, and then that seemed to do pretty well. I found that um, longer 3 blade fix just did not do well for me.
Okay.
The one that really did incredibly well for me was any slick trick, in particular the 150 and the 175 crossbow trick.
Okay.
I think those were just absolutely class acts, and all of my shooting back at that time was either out of strike zone 380 or an Excalibur of some sort.
Okay.
And they were dead on. I have not used fixed blade in quite some time now. I've just gone to expandables.
Okay.
So I can't really answer well, but like with the Shartak, that great big 375 grain thing that I'm going to hunt with this year for my bear.
Yep.
I put it at 6 and 12, and out of my Excalibur at 50 yards, it's hitting about an inch off from the field point.
Okay.
But only, and I do not understand this, it's hitting an inch high.
Okay.
And that's at 6 and 12. I would think it would be low because I think the spinning and the drag would be bringing it down.
Yep.
But no, and with the SWAT, it's hitting about half an inch high at 60.
Okay.
And out of the SWAT, that 375 grain broadhead using these heat vanes, I'm keeping one hole accuracy. I don't mean half an inch group, but with my 4 to 14 Zeiss Conquest on that particular crossbow, I'm getting one hole accuracy out of the field point. I'm getting about half inch accuracy out of the Shartak.
Wow. That's awesome.
Those are Jerry's arrows.
Okay. That is fantastic. Yeah, the reason I was asking that is just because I do think, there are a lot of broadheads that shoot like a field point, and there are just some that, at least in my opinion, you can't expect them to shoot exactly like a field point just because of their profile, their size, their center of mass, all that type of stuff all plays a factor into it. And if people out there are getting into this arrow tuning, getting into trying different broadheads, that kind of stuff, just I guess kind of know what your expectations should be, kind of what you're saying with some of the bigger heads. It sounds like what I've experienced, and you with your experience and shooting some of Jerry's arrows and that kind of stuff, you're probably shaving an inch off of where some of mine are. But they're, I personally, I'm totally fine if it's an inch or maybe even a little bit more up or down at that 50-yard range. That's a pretty easy scope adjustment to make, and as long as it's flying true, I usually don't worry about it. um Steve, I kind of wanted to wrap this up with like one more kind of topic, and that is outside of just the accuracy and the longer range shooting and the things that you have to do, maybe just taking like a holistic view at like the crossbow industry. And I guess kind of my two questions, or maybe we could say it as even three, is what, heading into 2022 and maybe even beyond, where the industry's going, what excites you the most? That's kind of like question one. Um, Question two would be, what worries you the most? And the third one is, if you were the president of the crossbow industry, you had power over everything, what is like one thing you would seek, you would change, you would do, um, in your opinion, that like would make crossbow hunting, crossbow shooting, the industry as a whole better?
Go back to question one of that.
Question one was, heading into 2022 and maybe even, a couple years beyond that, what excites you most about the crossbow industry?
Uh, this will be a bad answer. Well, the thing that I grew up moderately poor, and I'm still a very frugal, incredibly frugal person. I still have my 4-horse Johnson boat motor after 53 years. My 4-wheeler Honda is 24 years old. I'm pretty frugal.
Okay.
Um, and what to me is really exciting is to watch this KI Crossbow Company actually come out with this incredible scope at 229, their own line of arrows that do very well, plus their heavier arrow that I have not shot, but I think will even be better yet, with those outstanding broadheads, the X1, which is to me just a class act, and to see this comparatively low price type of price where you could do it all within one company very, very well. That's probably 1/3 the cost of the most expensive companies. I see that as very good. I am concerned about the economy. I'm really concerned about the economy coming up and how it could affect the season. Also, supply is a big problem, transportation, and inflation. I see all those things that can really affect the industry, which I think the companies like KI, I don't know if there are others, but that company is well said. I think Excalibur might be well said. I am an Excalibur fan.
And then the last one is, if you could change one thing or create one thing, do one thing, do you have one?
Yes, I would like to change the mindset that the answer to better hunting, greater range, etc., is more and more speed. I'm just not overwhelmed with speed. I have a beautiful Acleus 460 sitting down there with a nice size scope on it too. And yeah, and only shoots 441, but I mean that's pretty fast. And I love that bow, but I've taken it hunting one time. I use my 300 something feet per second bows, and I'm probably one of the longest range hunters that there is. I just don't feel that all the speed is. I think the cost is too great. The cost and reliability, the cost in lots of things.
Yeah, your answers are very similar to mine. I think if I was going to answer these three questions now for myself, but what excites me the most, um, I think is just the technology and performance of crossbow equipment, bows, arrows, everything that is available to the consumer, to the hunter at such a just wide range of prices. And when I think about more the beginners, just what you can get for your money, it's incredible where we're at. Even if you look back, 5, 7 years ago, as far as what you can get for the money now, I think it's phenomenal. What worries me the most, is kind of your answer number three as far as speed goes, um, is the speed game. That's what worries me the most. Is I I think we are, and I say we as the industry, um, we have to be getting to a point, at least with current uh, construction technologies of crossbows, that we have to be, in my opinion, close to the max. Where some things I think would have to change quite a bit to keep chasing that game. And I'm 100% with you on speed is great, but speed is not everything. Accuracy, reliability, being confident in what you're shooting, and good quality arrows, like you said, the thing that is actually flying, um, those those matter more, in my opinion. And if I was going to change something, and I don't know who would do it, I'm just like you. I'm a KI shooter. I'm a KI fan. They're a Michigan-based company. I love their stuff. I love my experience, you know, working with them and shooting their stuff. I would love it to be them, but maybe it's someone else. Is that if some company branched out of the speed game and looked at, instead of extreme speed, some type of like extreme durability. Like if someone could make just the ultimate tank of a crossbow that shot in that 370 to 400 range, that is what I would really like to see. Something that can take a beating. I don't know if it's possible, but if we're kind of playing the genie in a bottle, you can make a wish. That's what I would want, is something that is just a tank of a
Hey,
crossbow.
let me interrupt just a minute.
Yeah.
Jim Akers, the owner of the Twisted Arrow archery shop that I mentioned in Poplar Bluff, Missouri, who knows Jason and was somewhat helpful with strings and all, with the XP and also the X1, um, uh, said, if you ever get a chance to really twist Jason's ear, tell him to make a really, and incidentally, he's having less problems with KI than his other crossbows. Some of them are really big companies that span the whole spectrum. I don't want to mention the name, but and go all the way up to $4,000 on some of the crossbows, which he quit selling because of major problems with them. Uh, but what he said was, tell Jason, all I want is a crossbow that will shoot 375 to 400, will never break, that the strings will just keep on going, and name it the tank.
Did he really? I mean,
He
that's
really
perfect.
said that.
That is exactly what I want to name it, the tank. That's perfect. Well, Steve, I know it's
Well,
getting
maybe
late.
Jason will hear this and he'll get it from both Jim and you.
There you go. I haven't told Jason that exactly, but in similar fashion, I have said, that, I mean, that's me personally too. but that is what I would want. I would want whoever releases the tank. Maybe we'll get some royalties for the three of us coming up with that on this podcast. But that is my wish. I would like to see the tank. Whoever does it, I think would personally, I think would have a leg up in the industry because I think the speed game's got to run out here at some point. But Steve, this was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining me on this. Thank you for sharing your experiences, your insight. If people, we had mentioned Crossbow Nation's forum, SEW Sue. I don't exactly know how you normally go by that, but is that the best place if
It's the
people wanted
initials
to
of, yes, the initials of my
of your name?
Stephen Edward White.
Is that the best place if people wanted to reach out to you, pick your brain, even more than what we did here today? Is that the best place for people to reach out to you, or is there a better forum?
I think just a message on Crossbow Nation would be fine.
And that's exactly how Steve and I first hooked up. And he's, you can browse that forum. You can see there's a lot of responses on a lot of different topics from Steve. And if we didn't touch on it here, Steve's probably answered it on that forum. But if you guys are wanting to gain even more experience from Steve, that is the place to do it on Crossbow Nation, SEW. But Steve, again, thank you for joining me on this. We should do this again. I'll work on my my shooting game and see if I can tighten those groups up to get somewhat close to the level that you and Brian Miller and some of those other guys are doing. But I just really appreciate you coming on and sharing all this with us. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Matt. I appreciate it very much.